From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
A young life, emerging, growing, its development a question mark. In our modern world, a child and its vulnerable ego are all too soon placed in the crossfire of conflicting stresses and strains, reflected at the youngster from the harsh surface of his adult contacts. In our headlong race through life, a child's needs for adult acceptance and ego fostering are not always properly met. The child is sometimes lost in the labyrinth of our confused existence. His conflicts too often left unsolved, unnoticed. The resultant emotional maladjustment may be expressed aggressively, violently, right in the home, between rivaling siblings, or the aggression may be directed toward the wider world. The maladjustment may also be displayed in arrested development. An older boy fears children his age and plays with smaller, younger children. A boy whose sister is preferred may emulate her by being feminine and playing with girls. A seriously withdrawn youngster, unable to bring himself to join in play, mopes alone, an unhappy isolate. These types of maladjustments require guidance and treatment. This may take several forms, one of which is activity group therapy. Here each child acts out his problems and finds his own corrective interest, with the therapist remaining as passive as possible. After the intake interview, each child is discussed in conference. If accepted, he is grouped with others according to his specific problems and with an eye toward achieving a group balance. Under discussion at the moment is the case of Bob.
Bob, age 9½, was referred to the agency by his school principal, and I am recommending him for exclusive group therapy. Bob is in a class for gifted children, where he's a disturbing element, frequently clowning and talking out of turn. Bob occasionally wets his bed, has temper tantrums, and cannot accept limitations. He's an unhappy child and is avoided by other children. Bob slept in the parental bedroom until the birth of a younger sibling, when he was 5, at which time he began to neglect his appearance and refused to bathe. According to his mother, the boy has always been restless and extremely hyperactive. The mother is an over-anxious, inconsistent, inadequate person who has invested a great deal in the boy's school achievement. The father's warm, but has a quick temper. Bob likes his father.
Bob seems to be reacting to his mother's basic rejection of him for the younger sibling. Is that right?
Yes, the mother impressed me as a person who felt deeply inadequate as a wife and as a mother.
We will accept Bob for exclusive group therapy. The unconditional acceptance by and the relationship with the therapist, together with free acting out of his impulses and aggressions in a permissive environment, should serve to counteract the boy's feelings of insecurity and stabilize his behavior. However, little can be done for this child, in my opinion, without enlisting the cooperation of the mother, and she should be referred for treatment as well.
As the conferences progress, other cases are discussed. The group in which Bob is placed, and which we're going to follow, consists only of boys. Girls are treated in separate groups. Bob's group includes Albert, who is suspected of being a latent schizophrenic. Albert was
referred for exclusive group therapy. He resists going to school, is afraid of the dark, of animals, and of children. He insists on helping with the housework and with the cooking. He plays only with little girls because he says boys' games are too rough. He has severe temper outbursts, pretends he's a gangster, shadow boxes with and shoots at his own image in the mirror. He peeps when his mother is dressing and bursts into the bedroom when his parents are alone. His mother's disappointed in Albert. She prefers his sister 5 years younger. When Albert developed cysts on his breast at the age of 2 years, the mother feared that he would turn into a girl. The father is passive, self-centered, resents Albert's effeminacy, and beats him at times.
In addition to other personality problems, Albert has a character disorder. The value of a group to such a boy is that he will be able to establish masculine identifications, sublimate his masturbatory drives through work with his hands, and freely express his hostilities. But Albert will need special support and encouragement from the group therapist.
Other boys are gradually assigned to this particular group to create a group balance. Included are Mortimer, age 11, immature, fearful, stutters, diagnosis, psychoneurosis with conduct disorder. Robert, age 11, gifted but destructive and provocative. Diagnosis, mixed psychoneurosis with depression, possible organ neurosis. Morton, age 11, sensitive, clumsy, sucks his thumb, has nightmares. David, age 10, insecure, disruptive, provocative, varied and doubtful diagnosis, a severe case.
And now, Mr. Schallinger, I think you have another case for us for today.
Yes, and a somewhat difficult one. Henry, an only child, aged 10 and a half, was brought to the agency recently by his mother. She complained of the boy being shy and his fear of children and adults. Henry avoids all children. He even crosses the street when he sees them at play. He is extremely dependent and attached to his mother and rarely leaves her. Since about a year ago, he complains of headaches and pains in the leg. No organic basis for these has been found. He also has diffuse fears of being hurt and attacked. However, Henry does crave friends. Once, when he met a boy, he ran to his mother, announcing that he now had a friend.
Let's accept him for group therapy. But a psychiatric conference to clarify the diagnosis and the psychodynamics is desirable in this case.
The psychiatrist, Dr. Van Uphuizen, reviewed Henry's case and arrived at a diagnosis of anxiety hysteria.
Now, with regard to the treatment, I am in favor of trying group psychotherapy, as you suggested. I do feel that the boy will probably form an attachment to the leader very soon, and under this protective influence will relate to the other boys with much less anxiety.
So Henry also joins the group. The setting for this type of therapy is always simple. The room is devoid of all adornment and is designed to encourage children's free and spontaneous activity. All cabinets and work tables are made of ordinary planks of wood. At the first few sessions, the therapist sets out the materials on a table before the children arrive. Placing the materials on the table and exposing the tools and games provides visual stimulation and suggestion for activity.
Hello. I'm Audie. Audie.
When the boys arrive, the therapist introduces them to one another. He does not, however, suggest projects or occupations. At the first session, the boys attach themselves to the therapist and follow him about. After a period of acclimatization, contact is made among the boys. This is the beginning step in breaking down isolation. After a while, if left alone, each finds something that interests him. This is Henry, the boy who has an inordinate fear of children. Note the anxious, sucking movements of his lips. The therapist attempts to make him feel at ease. He introduces Henry to the other boys, but this makes Henry even more uncomfortable. Sensing this, the therapist leaves him and returns to helping one of the boys. This is good for Henry, for he sees the therapist as a helpful, positive person. The boy who is running is Bob. The free atmosphere of the group encourages him to act out his hyperactivity and distractibility, two of the main problems for which he was referred. The therapist now withdraws completely from the activity, letting the group take over. Henry withdraws into isolation, aimlessly working a dry paintbrush back and forth. This stooping posture is characteristic of the boy, and his anxiety is reflected in the movement of his lips. In these groups, all types of behavior are tolerated, and Henry's isolation does not evoke comment or derision. For some 45 minutes, Henry remains rooted to this spot. But gradually, he steals more and longer glances at the other boys, reflecting his awareness of their presence. The technique of leaving materials exposed proves its effectiveness when Henry picks up the table tennis ball and paddle. Henry divides his attention between watching the activities in the room and playing with the ball. Just as expected in these groups, an overt struggle suddenly breaks out. The struggle is resolved, and the adult did not interfere. The heat from the floodlights is affecting Robert. He yells, "Bring on the women," and demonstrates his brute force. Henry continues to move about. As he gains security, he tests his skill by sending the ball higher and higher. This draws him into a position closer to the other boys, but he has not spoken a word yet. Albert, the effeminate boy, arrives late. The therapist welcomes him. Albert is cautious, though seemingly not too frightened. Note how Albert delicately pats his hair and adjusts his collar. His movements are not characteristic of a real boy. Albert moves about the room and investigates it. This is the warm-up, or period of acclimatization. Henry is absent from the scene. He has again withdrawn. This time he has hidden himself in a large packing case, which is out of range of the concealed cameras.
Have you got any thinner,
All right, boys, let's clean up.
Albert's feminine characteristics are even more in evidence when he addresses another boy. Some time later, the therapist begins to clear away and, by suggestion, indicates that the cleanup phase of the session has been reached, preparatory to refreshments. But the boys ignore the suggestion. In this way, they express their disobedience and also test the therapist. When one of the boys asks for help on his ashtray, the therapist assists him. He thus passes the test. He is not a prohibitor, but a sanctioner.
That's the bench stuff. For stuffing a piece of wood. You know that you want us to work on any
You want this?
stiff.
How do you pick it up?
At early sessions, the therapist sets the stage for refreshments. It's expected the boys will assume this responsibility later on. Typically, the passive boys are first to take seats at the table, but at a distance away from the therapist. After 50 minutes inside the packing case, Henry now emerges, tempted by the refreshments. Fearfully, Henry takes a roundabout way and sneaks up to the table, as it were. Note the increased twitching of his lips, which accompanies his mounting anxiety. After a while, the more resistive youngsters are won over by the food and by the therapist's permissive attitude.
Oh, I know what kind of mirror this is. The bed on one side and the window on the other.
When it's time to end the session, the therapist does not tell the boys to leave. Instead, he has put on his coat as a form of suggestion. Most of the boys soon leave, including Henry, who has not spoken a single word during the entire 2-hour session. Bob and Robert stay on dawdling, passively defying the therapist, and again testing him. The therapist lets the boys take their time, once more passing the test.
So I'll see you next Tuesday. Oh, I'll come back later. I'll see you next Tuesday. All right? You want to leave it here? You work on it? Good night.
With Bob playing leader, the boys begin to break the locks of cabinets that contain materials belonging to other groups.
Huh?
I'll show you how to pick them locks. So do that. I know. That's the right thing that our use this. Watch out, watch out. What's that for? Who's gonna help me make that picture? Yeah, come on! Hey, we can use a few face brushes. Hey, yeah! No one? Yeah, but then we can use that much space. Let's move, guys. Hey, I'm gonna let me got in that cabinet. Yeah! Get it! Get the oven! Look, I got it! Hey, look! Not those guys, I don't want any. Sugar's too hot.
All the locks broken, the boys ransack the cupboards. The objects the boys are throwing, chewing, and trampling on are lumps of sugar they found in one of the cabinets. All this time, the therapist does not interfere, but keeps careful watch against the danger of injury to the boys. However, having become convinced that the excitement will not abate by itself, the therapist has decided this is one case where he must tell the children to go home.
No. I got enough. Give it to me.
The destructiveness we have witnessed is a natural phase in the development of the group, a part of the therapeutic process. If the group is properly balanced, such behavior should disappear in later sessions. But the degree of destructiveness in this case makes us suspect that this group is not properly balanced and some changes will have to be made. Regularly, supervision conferences are held to discuss both group dynamics and the development of each child. At this conference, the group balance is analyzed. It's decided to remove Robert, who is the real focus of infection, and replace him with Jack, age 10, brilliant but extremely withdrawn and effeminate. Diagnosis: compulsive neurosis. One of his idiosyncrasies is that he spends hours drawing maps of the city transportation system. Henry's favorite occupation for some weeks has been playing table tennis with a therapist. The therapist's support and Henry's testing of the reality of group living have diminished his fears. Henry is now also able to share the game with another boy. Despite his original terror of children, he now accepts quite freely direct physical contact. But the gleeful manner in which he expresses his joy reveals his basic infantile character. Henry and Morton now turn to playing tag. Henry is free and spontaneous, so different from the Henry we knew at the first session. The boys do not seem annoyed by all this, again demonstrating the group's tolerance. Bob stays close to the therapist because his disturbing actions in recent sessions brought the wrath of the group upon him. Being afraid, he seeks the therapist's support. He has also brought a friend, the boy at the Vice, for additional security. Albert's oscillatory movement behind the new, effeminate boy, Jack, and his use of the ruler is significant in view of the original problems for which he was referred. Despite the therapist's efforts to withdraw from the group's activities, the boys repeatedly involve him. At this stage, this can be interpreted as positive transference rather than mere dependence. Again, we see Henry make a social contact with relative ease, and with a stranger.
Now what's this? More phone.
The boys now take responsibility for cooking the frankfurters and setting the stage for refreshments, a task previously carried out by the therapist. The assurance and promptness with which they enter into the activity reveal their security and growth. The therapist deliberately remains apart from the group.
I'm next. Foreman's next.
Henry has made a list of the boys present and checks off their names as he serves them.
Yeah, that's right. Just like you do when anyone else. You don't like the rules? No. Okay then, off the table. I'm gonna take the bus off my house over there. What? Me too. I don't know where you have to stay human. I can walk there blindfolded. What's the number on it? What? Look. Here? What kind can we need?
A great deal of conversation enlivens the refreshment table. Among other things, the boys, on their own initiative, plan a trip.
We all got to be there Saturday at 10 o'clock. No. Where? At the Yankee Stadium? Gate 16. Gate 11. Gate 11. That's the bleachers. Yeah, and that's where when you go to the PIL, that's where all the PIL is. So we'll meet at Gate 11. So we'll wait at that pole in front of Gate 11. Yeah, well, I don't know. Neither do I. Let's go to our house.
Albert now cuts wood and is less effeminate. It is significant also that Albert, for the first time, has taken to wearing dungarees.
Find a hook. And I need some letters. I need a hook.
Bob, the third boy from the left, is no longer distractible. He concentrates on the job at hand. For a time, he was afraid of the others, but is now free and spontaneous with them. As Albert comes forward, we note his more vigorous bearing and manner. As he helps another boy, he further demonstrates his growing power and self-assurance.
But his father got a big one. His father got a big one, I mean. Yeah, he got $100 printing press in the house. Down here. Bring some that's quiet.
Get some air.
Come on. Let's try it. Oh, you want to see something, baby? Yeah. Won't say printed.
As for Henry, he now cooperates with Morton, setting type on a printing project. The therapist's neutral role does not vary. If anything, he withdraws even more from the group. Jack starts a fire with the electric plate used for cooking. Rather than forbid this interest, the therapist has previously placed an asbestos pad under the electric plate for safety. After a while, Bob and Henry join in. For Henry, this is a desirable development.
Hey, where's the water? Get water! Sandpaper! Come on, put that thing on. Maybe so. Put that in. Let's see.
The therapist remains watchful and ready to intervene, but only if absolutely necessary.
Yes. It doesn't burn, but look at that thing. Where is it?
Soon the boys, on their own, take steps to prevent the fire from spreading. One boy rakes the fire onto the asbestos pad. Another pulls out the electric plug.
You're stupid getting up plug. Boy, would you put that thing away?
Albert is now able to stand up against Bob, the most aggressive boy.
No, drop it in this top. What? No, before you look at him. Huh? No. Look at him.
Later in the session, Henry also has the courage to challenge Bob.
Clear out hand. You want to go? You gonna leave that here till next week?
Despite the interference, Bob continues to concentrate on his work. At the start of the refreshment period, the boys again plan a trip on their own, and for the first time, take a vote to decide where to go.
In the zoo, I'm gonna go down the rocket roller coaster. No, I wanna go on that plane there. You know that they take you up and stand up there for 5 minutes. I was sitting there when I was only around 5.
He was shitting there.
When I say, leave you up here. I don't want. Hey, Matt. Hey, say, I could do that.
Well,
No bending spoons, no bending in someone else's property.
I want to leave mine this way. What did you say? What's easy to bend? You just use your hand.
Oh, there I in the cell I sit with my fingers dipped in.
No.
There I sit with my fingers.
For the first time, a number of the children use profanity.
No. When the people pass by, they throw.
I know.
Mine is straight to the
Mayonnaise?
Mayonnaise.
Shut the door, I'm
Get it?
What? You know why the tomato face turned red? Because he was putting in the icebox when the mayonnaise was dressing. Why don't you let him to the AMP? He wanted to see ceiling fries. Why didn't Norman throw a hunk of butter out of the window? He wanted to see butter drop. He wanted to see the price drop. Butterfly. Yeah. Why did the Mormon jump off the big Woolworth building? Because he wanted up a wall. Because he wanted to make a big hit on Broadway. Woolworth building was located on Broadway. 34th Street. That's right, the big Woolworth. 34th Street and Broadway. Sao Paulo!
The refreshments were delayed to test the boys' frustration tolerance, but they were not disturbed by the delay.
Next time you come get Snow, will you?
Get
What? You know, Snow. This man lives on onions for Snow. What's Snow with you? What's Snow? What's Snow with you?
Ah, that's a joke.
Hey! Honey, stop!
Why do
This
watermelons
guy!
have so much water in
Will
them?
you stop yelling?
What? They're planted in the spring.
What? Now look, I'm gonna tell you. This guy loves onions. I don't know if I said it or not. It's kind of dirty. This guy loves... shut up and you eat them. Okay. This guy loved onions. Well, he told us what... Let me hear it. If it's dirty, I'll wash it now.
Bob decides to tell a profane joke in the presence of the therapist. This is the ultimate test to which children submit a therapist.
What'll happen if you... What would you have left if you took the formula?
It is this consistent acceptance of all types of self-expression by the children that lies at the core of the therapeutic process in activity group therapy.
I get it, but would you see if there's any soap down there? Yeah, pretty good. So? Don't let him get out. I don't get it. I get it, but I don't know.
Bob went a little too far, and the boys decide to wash his mouth with soap.
Hey, you want it? I would imagine the fuse goes down.
The boys strike a bargain. If Bob will bring firecrackers to the next session, they'll let him off without the oral cleansing.
Yeah. You get those or you get the soap.
And the long 1-inch firecrackers.
2-inch ones.
Trips and outings give the boys an opportunity to continue in their masculine identification through participation in typical boys' activities. The opportunity is also provided to match themselves against one another and accept the reality of their strengths or weaknesses. The competitive factor, however, is underplayed. Neither success nor failure evokes special comment from the therapist or the children. Bob's restlessness has completely disappeared. His tidiness is in sharp contrast with his earlier disheveled appearance and is particularly significant in view of his refusal to bathe when he first came to us. His mother, who was seen occasionally by our psychiatric caseworker, reports that he no longer has temper tantrums. He no longer wets his bed, does not resist attending school, and does his homework unassisted. He now has friends, and when last seen, the mother said, "For the first time in my life, I am enjoying Bobby as a son." She further suggested that in view of Bob's improvement, treatment would no longer be necessary. Bob has been treated exclusively in activity group therapy. The satisfaction of Bob's social hunger coupled with the therapist's calm, accepting attitude and the restraining action of the group, have served to strengthen his ego and his self-control.
I'll tell you, if you break this by banging it, the whole thing will split, and that would be wasted. I suggest you take the whole thing and cut that out, see? You got the keys?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Albert's physical bearing and coordination, too, present a contrast to the feminine demeanor displayed at the first session. The fact that he repeatedly works with a hard, resistive material, such as wood, further reveals a fundamental character change. Albert's mother reports that he no longer plays with girls and has given up his interest in housework. He now associates with boys. Albert's inordinate attachment to his mother has decreased, and the school reports that he works up to capacity. Like Bob, Albert has been treated exclusively through group therapy. The group provided Albert with models for masculine identification and a testing ground for his masculine drives that proved adequate and supportive. Bob now applies himself industriously to a painting, which could be interpreted as a portrait of his former self. There is a striking resemblance in the expression on Bob's face at this moment and the imp he has drawn. A while later, Bob blots out the imp. One might ask, is Bob blotting out his former self? As for Henry, it is clear that he is neither moping nor withdrawn as at the start. He is purposeful and confident. Henry no longer avoids children, and his bearing is erect in contrast to his former stooping posture. Henry's mother reports that he belongs to a baseball club and has friends who visit him at home. He is much less dependent on his mother and no longer follows her about. Henry's withdrawal and defiance at school have also disappeared. Henry, too, was treated exclusively in activity group therapy. The support supplied Henry by the therapist and the consistent group acceptance of his emerging powers broke through his defensive withdrawal, enabling him to develop the courage to deal with reality. Later, Henry plays checkers with Bob. The decrease in Bob's hyperactivity and the increase in Henry's animation have brought these two boys to a common level. This leveling off is one of the basic aims of activity group therapy.
What?
Yes, you wanted that. I didn't like that story. Yes, I did.
Well, if you trap him, the game's over.
No, if I got that sidetracked, and I got my men surrounded in such a way, but I can't do anything with him.
Well, the
and
draw...
he just keeps on going back and forth. Wouldn't that be a draw?
The draw is when you both concede that the game can't be won by either one.
I know, so that's...
Oh, it can be one.
Don't say nothing.
Can be one. You saw you know how to play with.
You don't know how to play teams, you can see that, because...
I know how to play.
Maybe
There wasn't.
The calm and orderly atmosphere of the group, epitomized during the refreshment period, reflects emotional growth and inner control. Each boy's ego has been strengthened and his self-esteem built up through experience with actual situations and interaction with the others in the presence of an accepting substitute parent. The change in each boy, however, has been gradual, almost imperceptible. Take Albert, for example. When we first saw him, his movements and actions were markedly effeminate. By the 18th session, a slight increase in masculinity could be observed. In succeeding sessions, Albert took to wearing dungarees and engaged in boys' work with his hands. He overcame his timidity to an extent that he was able to stand up against aggression. And in this session, Albert's physical bearing and coordination are in full evidence. As for Bob, in early sessions, his hyperactivity and distractibility were sharply displayed. He acted out his aggressiveness and hostility, reaching a peak of destructiveness. Then Bob changed to withdrawal, and for a while seemed afraid of the group. But in time, Bob developed freer relations and ease, as well as control, enabling him to concentrate on his projects. And in this session, Bob is a tidy, calm, controlled individual. As we saw, the other boys have to varying degrees also made progress. Jack, originally completely isolated and morose, can now laugh spontaneously. Mortimer, once timid and restless, now has more confidence and control. David, originally very withdrawn, has developed a certain amount of ease in group relations. Finally, there is Henry, who was so fearful and never played with children. At first, he stood frozen in a corner, his mouth twitching, isolated. Then, gradually, he began to move about the room, still anxious, and making no contacts with the other boys. In later sessions, Henry took part in play. His twitch disappeared, but he still acted out his joy in an infantile manner. Soon he was able to assume the responsibility of serving the refreshments. In time he joined in projects with other boys and developed to the point where he dared interfere with the activity of an aggressive boy like Bob. Finally, we see him a more mature, confident individual. And thus, towards the end of the 65th session, a considerably changed group of boys sits at the refreshment table. Each now is more prepared to face life on his own, to cope with the stresses and strains of modern living. Each now has a better chance to develop into a happy, constructive adult and fruitful citizen of the community.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.